Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, the voice of bodybuilding. And welcome back, Dr. Lisa Lewis. I'm really excited for this one because obviously we teased it a little bit on the last episode, didn't we?
Yes, we did. And thank you for asking me back. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's so good as you know, as I mentioned on the first one we did, for me to get perspectives from so many different people that are not necessarily just in the bodybuilding realm, because of course, when you're a bodybuilder, everything you populate is sort of bodybuilding on social media, you've got your coach,
Mm,
etc. And I feel like, a perspective like yourself, you can actually thought provoke, which of course on a podcast when you're listening, it's quite an intimate exchange. So even if you pick up maybe, oh, okay, so haven't thought of it like that before, you can essentially grow from listening to something like a podcast, can't you?
hmm
Mm,
Yeah. So
yeah.
it's great about the medium and you bringing in people from different disciplines and with different perspectives, I'm sure is
Mm.
really spot on for your audience.
Yeah. And I will give you a little shout out from a couple of the people that saw that you were on here. So 4 weeks to the beach, Aram, he's called 4 weeks to the beach on Instagram. He
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was like, I said, you're a hidden, as in you're a hidden gem in the industry. And he was like, she's not hidden from good coaches. And I was like, right. And again, it's like, you're probably similar to myself. We're not necessarily looking for external validation or trying to find praise, as it were. But when the right people do notice what you do and what you bring, I actually feel like, and this ties in a little bit to our subject today about motivation, it gives you almost a bit of a pep in your step, and you think, wow, this person that I see as, maybe it's someone that you sort of see on a pedestal or whatever. When
Mm,
they praise what you do, I certainly find for myself, it just gives me that, like, okay, I'm on the right track. And that does, I feel, feed a level of motivation within myself to know that I'm on the right path. If you see what I
hmm
mean.
hmm Well, I'm very reassured. I think there's a good feeling I get when coaches are like open to my ideas or that they have ideas that are similar and they say, "Oh, I've thought about this or I've wondered how to incorporate this," or like you do incorporate a lot of psychologically minded strategies
Mhm.
with your clients. So that to me is reassuring and I always feel a lot of gratitude to be welcomed in to the space, because I'm not a trainer, I'm not a strength and conditioning coach. But there are plenty of people in the industry who really have, like you, welcomed me in with open arms, which has been so much fun.
Yeah, it is certainly, when you're doing anything in life, and I get people that listen that are lifestyle bodybuilders, they're not necessarily looking to go to stage. I also get
Right.
people that are sort of just like, oh, I'd like to learn about bodybuilding, but I'm not sure if I would sort of go fully into it. And
Yeah.
certainly something when we look at motivation, I feel like it's almost, and this is good to talk about for those people that are looking at bodybuilding, when you see something as this, like, you've got to go to the gym every day, you've got to monitor everything, I'm not good enough to do that, so I won't try. and
Hmm.
and I don't have the motivation. I haven't got it there. And I feel
Hmm.
like, again, it's, trying to bridge that gap sometimes, isn't it? Of like, this thing that you can do can actually be incorporated into your life and the principles of something like bodybuilding rather than
Hmm.
that scare factor. And I wonder if that probably could be where we start in regards to when people say, I don't have the motivation for something. I guess
Hmm.
there's element. I mean, this is probably a rabbit hole with self-doubt, etc., and things in their past. But maybe your sort of thoughts on if someone was looking to get a bit healthier, join the gym, etc., and they're put off,
Hmm.
and the intrinsic motivation maybe isn't a natural thing for them. The sort of first steps to them, taking on a bit of discipline in life, etc.
hmm and you started to answer the question because the last thing you said there was intrinsic motivation, right? Which is a quality of motivation. So I always think it's very interesting when people talk about not having motivation to do something they want to do, because if you want to do something, you are motivated to do it. So when people say, I'm not motivated, to go to the gym, for example, I wonder what that means. So if you truly do not have motivation to do it, it may be because the behavior is incongruent with your values or your goals. So, for example, in the last couple of weeks, I have been asked no less than 4 times if I'm interested in competing in something called Hydrox, which
Okay,
is
yeah.
a new CrossFit style competition. And people have approached me at the gym, and I've just been hearing a lot about it. I have no motivation to pursue that because I don't want to get injured. I don't want to work more on cardio, and I don't have the time. I don't have the interest, right? It's inconsistent with what I want to do when I have time for fitness. So that is certainly one type of just not having the motivation. It's something different when somebody would, if somebody says something like, "Oh, I'd really like to do that competition, but I don't have the motivation." What does that mean? Where's the disconnect between that want, that desire, and then their assessment
Mm,
that they don't have what it takes? Sometimes people are talking about discipline and being able to sustain a habit over time. And so to me, that means the type of fuel that's in their tank is like either a low quality, like
mm,
often something like fat loss or appearance tends to be a not very potent type of fuel.
mm,
Yeah. So just last week, I was talking to a client of mine who struggles a lot with trying to manage her eating and worrying about her weight. And she's like, I know I'm going to be weighed at the doctor in 2 weeks, and I don't want to see a number I don't want to see. And I'm thinking about it a lot, and that should be motivating me.
mm,
And, we talked about it more, and she ended up saying, it's in my whole life, that has never been an effective motivation for me to worry about getting on the scale at some point in time, right? So sometimes the way in which a person is motivated might be this quality or this kind of level,
mm,
and what they want to do, they perceive to be, or truly, because in bodybuilding, you need consistency, right? So you need sustainability of that motivational source.
mm,
And as motivation becomes a higher and higher quality, AKA, as it becomes more intrinsically motivated, it becomes more sustainable. It's like a renewable energy source, and it becomes higher quality. So, for example, people who like bodybuilding, I bet a lot of bodybuilders might say they're intrinsically motivated, but pure intrinsic motivation means you're only doing it for the joy and like the state of ass kickery. And I don't think there's a lot of joy in days and days and days of caloric deficit while you're exerting yourself calorically, right? Like it's not a lot of joy. But what it is a set of behaviors that are congruent with personal values and identity, right? So I'm a girl who keeps her head down and sticks to her nutrition and gets her ass to bed and gets through her training and gets her sets and reps
mm,
every day, every week, every month, right? And so when you are doing that, when you are living and demonstrating this set of goals and values that mean a lot to you, feels good. Even if it feels bad,
yeah.
it feels good, right?
Yeah.
So that level of motivation is very sticky, it's very sustainable. If somebody puts an ER after their name, I'm a bodybuilder, I'm a CrossFitter, I'm a runner. To me, that suggests the motivation is really baked in. It's quite
Mm,
intrinsic, even if the activity itself and all the activities that are required in preparation aren't necessarily
mm.
enjoyable.
Yeah, it's something I label as like a cathartic enjoyment. So
Hmm.
I certainly, for me, I'd be like, I enjoy bodybuilding. I love the pursuit. And
Mm.
my other half takes the mick out of me because he's like, people don't want to, exactly what you label there. People don't like to do those things. Like it doesn't bring joy. And I almost had the opposite. And there might be listeners at the same where prep would be almost where I'd thrive because there's no the boundaries are so set, right, Lisa? Like it's like
Mhm.
literally every day you have these tick boxes. You have to do this because you're going to step on stage. Then you come out of it and suddenly people are going, do you want to go for a meal? Do you want to come out? Oh, you can miss the gym. Your coach is obviously promoting recovery, etc. And I'd be like, oh God, where's my framework? It feels like it's too loose for me. And
Mm,
again, people listening could be the same, that actually the preparation is not easy, but they can apply themselves more because it is so strict. But then, of course, it's coming out of that, and almost you can have this opposite effect with motivation, where you're so motivated because you have this ultimate goal of stepping on stage half naked, let's face it. Then suddenly it's like, oh, I don't feel the motivation there now. Like, oh, the stage is not there. Although, of course, your growth phase is attributing the next time you dive down for the stage. It's like suddenly it's like, oh, I don't know what to do here, because it feels like it's almost this interstitial space of what I can eat food. Like, what does that mean? And
mm,
again, that's quite hard as well, flexing through the multiple stages, because unless you have the time in the game, the experience to do it, you can have these flattening off phases as well, if you're not in it for those reasons of, like, I literally feel exhilarated by the pursuit.
mm,
It's like, I often say to people, if someone said to you, why do you bodybuild? Ideally you would be able to say quite quickly, this is what I gain from it. This is what I love. This is, I say I'm a bodybuilder. I say I'm passionate. So what is it you actually like about it? Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning, even when you don't have that motivation there?
mhm.
And I think sometimes, this could be all sports, right? Or jobs or whatever. It's like sometimes I feel like people will probably be a bit like, why are you asking me that? I don't know. I just do that. Like, it's just something that I do. I'm a bodybuilder, as you say.
Well, your reason, which is the pursuit, reminds me a lot of the neuroscience of motivation. Motivation is really, when you think about neurochemistry, you think about dopamine, really, is what motivation is about. I like to listen to Andrew Huberman talk about motivation. He has a number of podcasts people can listen to. I think he has a really straightforward way of talking about motivation basically equals dopamine, and that what you just said is a major part, that chasing, pursuing, right, working to achieve something is very rewarding for the brain. And there have even been qualitative research studies, interviews with people who have drug addiction, describing when they're going to get their drug, when they're driving, or even when they've got it in their hand and they haven't used it yet, they feel good. They feel that reward even before the substance is in their body, because their brain is actively pursuing and trying to achieve reward. And in fact, many people who love achievement talk about kind of a flattening when they arrive
Mm.
at that moment, right? Where they're done chasing and either they've won the award or it gets to the performance time. Like you're saying, it's time to start eating more, and that's less rewarding for you.
And I feel like as well, it's definitely males also. I do have a large female following, but you also are sort of expected, as it were, to put on weight. You're changing you achieve potentially the best physique in your mind that you've ever seen. You're seeing these striations and everything. It's like, whoa, this is what I've achieved. I've never seen this before in myself. It's what I've seen on Instagram, etc., etc. Then again, it's like, well, we need to focus on health here. And I feel like unless you've got the time in the game and you actually understand that it is incredibly unhealthy to stay at those condition levels,
Right.
you can actually replace it with, this is my goal now, to get healthier, to restore my sleep, my hunger hormones, etc. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
maybe, first timers listening, or people early on in their bodybuilding, actually that wouldn't be a goal that's good enough.
Mm,
I want you to be able to sleep for 8 hours rather than wake up restless every couple of hours, or I want you to be able to feel a certain way. I wonder if there's anything we could sort of delve into there with people that, are finding that part hard. Like you say, you get to the achievement and it flattens off. I often reference, having a support network to talk with people, but do you sort of deal with anyone that it is in these sort of different phases, etc. And they actually maybe it's like an eating disorder as well, this type of stuff, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, and chasing that optimal level of either appearance, performance, achievement. This happens with professionals that I work with too, who are working, not necessarily doing any kind of sport. And what I talk about with them is the long game, that there are sprints, you have intervals where you're working really hard. And then you need to have times where you have recovery. You cannot do a 15-year interval. You are going to injure yourself and you're not going to be able to perform. So if you enjoy the chase, if you enjoy the pursuit, do it and then have a recovery period. And your recovery period is about being able to enter the next pursuit at your highest level of capability. Because if you are not recovered, you are not going to be able to chase it the way that you want to chase it. And this is true for athletes as well as this is true for people I work with in like private equity and
Mm,
finance and physicians. It's like, yes, you can take on a project. Yes, you can fill up your plate really full and like really push yourself. And then you have to recover. So there has to be a periodization if you want to be able to have a career and do X, whatever that is. So I really pitch to them that you may not love sleeping and adding body fat, but that is in pursuit of your goal, which is to get after it the next interval
mm,
that you have. And most people, by the time they get to me, they know this because they've either had an injury or they're starting to have burnout, or a physician is concerned about some injury that won't heal.
mm. I like you mentioned burnout there. This is certainly something I haven't really actually delved into to a large degree on the podcast. It's something I speak with clients about, if there are potential. I feel like each client I work with, I can almost see the signs of maybe they're leading in that direction before
Mhm.
they can. And it's a really nice thing to be able to do with clients and go, actually, there's some signs here we're potentially leading that way. And I feel
Yeah.
like a bit like the sort of labels that we see in the space, Lisa, with well, not just bodybuilding, right? This is anything that we're maybe pushing to different degrees of professionalism, etc., where people will sort of go, "I'm at burnout," and they don't even really know what it is. It's almost like that they've hit a point of maybe quite high fatigue, etc. And I try
Mhm.
to sort of break it down in my own fashion, as it were, to say, true burnout from what I believe is literally, you can hardly do anything. You're pretty much bedbound, it's literally you're gone. And
Mhm.
people will throw around, I'm at burnout because they've had some busy weeks or whatever. And again, that's an education thing, isn't it? Like, how do you know? And I'm no way, shape, or form, saying anything negative towards that. But maybe we could break down, what the actual signs are towards burnout and
Mhm.
what it actually looks like. Because that could be quite interesting for people for sure.
And this is another high achiever vulnerability that I have a client who will say, I don't realize until like Wile E. Coyote, like I've gone off the cliff and like I haven't, I'm about to fall off. And you're right, burnout is past the point of no return. You're cooked. Usually people are talking about it as they're arriving at that moment. They're already in the red zone. And so what I talk to people about is, could we develop a way for you to get a more sensitive radar so that when you leave the green zone and you go into yellow or orange, you can pick that sign up to prevent you from getting to this red place where you're either all the way burnout or pretty close? And it's really fascinating because a lot of my clients, most recently a cardiologist said to me, "Oh, I have absolutely no idea when I need a rest or when I need a recovery." And I think this is true of a lot of people who are type A, push themselves really hard to achieve. It's like, and I can speak too, like there's a lot of people listening, and probably you and I, we are really good at grinding. We are really good at pushing ourselves. And over the years, we've probably got really good at tuning out cues and signs of discomfort, fatigue, being a little bit over. And that has been to our advantage in many, many, many ways. And society prompts us to, build our best self and go after things in life. So most of the clients I see are very good at that. And what they need to develop is a set of skills around understanding when they need rest, recovery, timeout, step back, a refeed meal, whatever
Mm,
the case may be, because they're very insensitive to that and they don't know until it's too late. And then a pattern starts to develop.
mm,
And so when we start talking about this, I try to get people to mention, like, if you look back, use your hindsight, right? Like, what are the things that started to happen? And there's different examples, different stories, different lives. I feel that one of the early signs is irritability.
yeah.
And what I say to people is irritability is not a personality trait, it is a symptom.
Mm,
If somebody's cranky and somebody's short and somebody's agitated by these little teeny things that shouldn't matter, that is a flag
mm,
that, the mental health immune system is like wearing thin. And these little things are really penetrating.
yeah, I definitely feel like that's certainly something that can transfer even to like sleep as well, restless sleep, or you,
Hmm.
and you almost like you say when you learn your own individual signs, because as I mentioned, with clients, they've all got different things that I pick up in a check-in or what have you, and I'm like, I've seen this before. There's that we notice data, etc., and trends. And I really love how you frame that there. And this is going to be so true to many people in the bodybuilding space. You almost become immune to what we could label as suffering. There's the different ways to look at that, Lisa, isn't there? And there's people in the world suffering without that being their choice. So I'm always, vigilant around how I frame that. But essentially, when you are pushing into a very severe deficit, your body is suffering, right? Like your mind also is going in that direction, and you do get used to it. And that's why I
Hmm.
say, preparation. People could be listening, going, "Well, actually, that's where I prefer. I thrive there." And
Yeah.
that can be for a multitude of reasons, right? Like we know, past trauma, etc., and what's happened before you get into the sport, or maybe the professional endeavor. And I feel like it's certainly something that is incredibly hard if you're that way to,
Hmm.
like you say, pick up signs. I bet it's quite a journey with your clients when you're trying to sort of install that in them to essentially take ownership themselves to, be able to deal with this themselves and learn and then report back to you.
And it's a tough sell because being able to endure suffering and maintain hard behavior, difficult behavior, has has so much reward in society, you know? So I remember working with a professional hockey player years ago, and she said to me, I don't feel satisfied until I am completely gassed, like completely. So she was overtraining so much every single day because she couldn't get to that point of like, okay, now I deserve to eat and rest until she was completely wiped. So she could not recover from injuries. She was waking up every 90 minutes, at night, and she was she was mentally ill also. She was very anxious. And so that has accumulated over years and years of engaging that behavior. And so there's an unlearning that has to happen.
Mm,
And I can't make a sweeping generalization for everybody, but I do think that for many people, we tie achievement to self-worth. Like, if I do work really hard and I really dedicate myself and I really suffer, then I'm worthy, or then I matter, or then I deserve to
mm,
eat or sleep or be a good enough person. And I bet a lot of people listening would be like, oh, that's not me. I think sometimes the stuff is buried down really, really deep messages that we heard at a very young age, probably from well-meaning adults about work hard and be disciplined and work on yourself, but that get warped into I have to do something extreme and achieve, or else, I don't matter.
it's certainly as well. I feel like in this current scenario we're in the social media world, etc. I feel like it certainly doesn't help. probably a lot of different spaces in the fitness umbrella, because again, you see the posts about I do XYZ, and this is what I've then achieved from it. And there's going to be people that need essentially a lot more time in something like bodybuilding or a different sport to master something like discipline to the degree
Mm,
that perhaps, attributes to more accolades, etc. And again, you can sort of find this. I don't know. You're almost pushed into like, well, they're doing X, so
mm,
I should be doing it, and you could
mm,
almost accumulate your own sort of maybe mental health. I don't know if it would be a disorder, but like the skewing of your mental health could
mm,
literally stem from the way the world's going in regards to the social media as well. I'm sure you'd agree.
mm. I definitely have worked with people who we need to go into their social media and edit out certain feeds and certain people they follow who literally make them sick, who make them worried with what they're doing or what they look like or how much money they earn compared to someone else. And this seems to be, I'm not an expert. This seems to be significant in the fitness industry because, some of my clients own their own fitness business, whether it be a gym or some kind of coaching business. And what I see is that following other people in the realm can really mess with your own evaluation of how you're doing and mess with your own happiness. Like by focusing on that and comparing yourself, it can really rob people of enjoying whatever it is they've got going on in their own business. And then, of course, as you know, people are not putting pictures up of themselves when they're not in preparation or when they're recovering, and they're not crazy lean and everything else. And so there is a skewing, just like 30 years ago when we had magazines and all the supermodels were airbrushed, there is a skewing of what we see people look like and how we take that information
Mm,
in. And now, with the algorithms of social media, that algorithm knows what you're pausing to look at more, and then it's giving you more of that. So it really can be a runaway train if you're not being like a discerning consumer about what it is you're looking at.
the algorithm's a bit of a bugger, isn't it? It can really, it's something that I guess you sort of know it's happening, but you almost, and you touched on dopamine earlier. I feel
Mm,
like, I've certainly met a variety of different people from all different walks of life, as it were, that you almost get dopamine hits when you see the things that upset you, the things that
mm,
make you
mm,
work harder or make you do X.
mm,
But because you almost become, it's almost like your subconscious is feeding on the negativity to drive you. And then this could maybe attribute to when people say you're bodybuilding for the wrong reasons. I feel like, you could actually probably get into something like bodybuilding through seeing people at the gym or whatever. You could actually probably get into it and be fed by a negative portal of energy, like you spoke about before, and maybe a negative motivation almost because you feel, well, I've got to do it. This person's doing it, and you're looking for that to actually stepping stone you forward. Would that be
mm.
something that could happen?
Hmm. It's like it's focusing on something outside of you and comparison. I think that is, going back to talking about quality of motivation, I think that is a poor quality because it is so extrinsic.
Mm,
It isn't so much rooted in you and your beliefs and your values and your identity. It's more maybe in someone else's.
mm,
So I think those kinds of pursuits tend to die off relatively quickly or not have success because it's just such a poor level. It's just a not very sustainable fuel source, I
mm.
guess.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then, like you labeled it, robs you of the actual joy that you
Okay.
could. What I feel like as well, it's like I sort of, it upsets my bodybuilding heart where I'm like, oh, you could experience so much joy from, and I'm not. This is not just competing. I'm talking about as I touched on at the start, the principles of bodybuilding. Like when you're actually going to the gym, hitting a step target, looking at sleep, like you don't maybe need to monitor it to the nth degree, having some health supplements. Like when we actually look at those things, they're extremely positive. And for most people. I'm sure you'd agree. So it's like you could maybe not get to that point where actually you're feeling a bit better in yourself. You're keeping fit, etc. That's good for longevity of life. You're probably gonna feel a bit better, and it robs you of that. The gift of like, oh, I want to keep fit for my own reasons rather than like, oh, the doctor's told you or whoever it
Right.
is. You know.
Right. You're talking about subjective well-being, it's like people can describe that in different ways, but it's a felt sense,
Mm,
right? Of being like 2 weeks ago, there's this man I'm working with in therapy, and we were kind of talking about what it was that has been helpful in his life. Like, was it A or B or C or D? And it was kind of a chicken or egg. And we were talking about different behaviors he's changed and different ways he's changed lifestyle. And he's like, well, the session started, and then my wife said I was a lot happier. So that's a Google review for you. And what he was saying is, me coming in here and talking helped me to make changes. And I don't really know. I can just say I feel better, and people in my life are saying I'm less cranky and happier, But that's a very squishy, not black and white data
mm,
benefit. But to your point, like what a wonderful benefit to experience.
mm. It
There's
is.
a book called, oh, sorry, Sarah. There's a book called Exercise for Mood.
Mm,
And it's by this psychologist that was at BU. His name's Michael Otto. And basically, he talks about helping people start habits of exercise, not for some outcome like weight or some achievement, but for how you feel. Like, do it for how you will feel after you do it, and the better mood you'll have, and the better everything. And he is a researcher, so it's based on some evidence that sometimes people who say, I don't have the motivation to exercise, when they are encouraged more to focus on how they feel after they move, that is stimulating motivation, because they're like, oh, I do feel better, or my joints feel better, or whatever, after I do move around some.
yeah. I feel like in that type of process, when there's not necessarily, because I work with people that don't really have a physique goal per se. They don't really want to go down the rabbit hole of scale weight too much, although they know they could do with losing some weight over time. They're just like, I'd quite like to be coached and get a training plan that's for my needs, get a bit of advice around nutrition, like it, and it's. I feel like some people quantify that as like, well, what's the point? And it's like, well, actually, sometimes the joy that's experienced and the gratefulness to just do those things, I mean, it's next level, Lisa. Like they're like, you've changed my life, and really, it's small interventions. Like,
Yeah.
you said with your example of therapy, it's
Mhm.
starting therapy within a couple of weeks. Their physique is then changing, their scale weight is going down, but that wasn't the intention. So they're like, whoa, what's this thing? And the motivation, then you get the reward without realizing how good it would feel. The motivation turns into this like, maybe I have got motivation to do these things.
So that's the internalization there,
Mm,
right? Is it starts with something they actually want, totally devoid of other people's opinions. And then that little fire gets stoked, and then they get rewarded around that,
yeah.
which is really the most sustainable type of motivation there is. And I personally wish that every child had the opportunity for that. Like, I think physical education or PE class should be helping kids learn how to move their body and engage in different things, and help them figure out what they like and how they like to move, so that when you enter adulthood, you have that, like what you're seeing with some of your clients, like, oh, I do like to do this. I think it's such a shame when I meet an adult and they're like, I'm not an athletic person. Like,
Mm,
yeah, you are. If you're a human being, you're an athletic person. You just haven't had the opportunity to develop that part of yourself. So, like, what a treat for you to get to see people come in kind of novice, and then like discover they enjoy some aspect of working on themselves.
It's yeah, like I get well, you can tell I get excited because it's like, and because you said on our first episode for your realm of sort of therapy, and if you were to label it therapy for some people, like if I was to label it, you're now a bodybuilder, unless that's what they want. I feel like it's almost like you have to break a barrier of, well, let's see what we can do to enhance your life as it is. Let's look for some longevity, some enjoyment, etc. Then they have the therapy or the coaching, and they're like, whoa, I didn't realize this could be a thing. And with the therapy, I actually spoke to a few people off the back of our first podcast where, and because I'll pick up certain things as you can attribute there, Lisa, where it's like, when you said that it's therapy, people go, "Oh, I don't need that. I don't need a psych." Da, 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 da. It's almost again that they put up a wall before they get the benefits. So you read because you relabel it, don't you, as like a sports therapy to get them.
Well, I listen for the word that they're using when they come in. No, I want your coaching, or I want to seek your counsel, or I think I could use a few sessions just to make a strategy. I listen for that language they're using,
Mm,
and then I try to reflect that back, see if that's what we're talking about there, and then try, of course, over the course of the first conversation to get a feel for what it is
mm,
they're looking for.
mm,
Um, yeah, so I did just a couple weeks ago have somebody say, I need to restart therapy, and here's why, and so that was a very clear cut case. But people come in all over the spectrum, and I think you've got to meet them where you're at, right? Like if you met somebody new as a novice and you're like, I'm a bodybuilding coach, here's what we're going to do, that would be very off-putting to them because that's not where they're at.
mm, mm. Because it's certainly in the space. I feel like some people sort of try and call it out or whatever, and they say, lifestyle clients aren't bodybuilders. So if you're a bodybuilder as a coach, so I'm a bodybuilder, so a coach for me is a different head. However, I've got experience in the bodybuilding world. So
Right.
I don't treat someone that comes to me with the goals that I've just mentioned there as an example as right, okay, we need to be on the strict, etc., etc. If it goes down that path organically, absolutely. But like you just touched on there, it's like again the individuality probably for both of our realms of therapy or coaching, it
Mhm.
can be missed, and that could put people off. Also, I wanted to ask you with therapy, I feel like this is a relevant point that I've certainly experienced over my time of having different therapists, etc., particularly in my younger years. If you don't gel with a therapist and you've got to that point in your life where you go, right, I need to reach out to someone like Lisa for some therapy, and you don't gel, I try to say essentially, don't let that put you off. Look for somebody else because again, when we tie this into motivation, you've got the motivation to find a therapist, and maybe you feel like you've been let down and you could retreat. From a psychology standpoint, is there anything in that for people that maybe are listening and it's like, I could look for some therapy, but I'm not going to find someone that can help me, or this sort of limiting belief around it?
Well, the first thing I would do is validate how hard it is to, number one, find a therapist who's taking clients and who has availability and who you can afford or takes your insurance or whatever, right? So that's hard. And then it's kind of like dating that their chemistry is the lion's share of what predicts the outcome of the therapy. So there have been a lot of research studies investigating what is the best type of therapy, what is the most effective type of psychotherapy. Is it CBT or DBT or MCBT or psychoanalysis or family therapy or brief treatment or blah, 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 blah. I mean, there's all these different flavors of therapy, right? And what has been found numerous times is that the type of therapy makes no difference in outcome. What makes the most difference in whether or not the therapy was effective and helpful for the individual is the quality of the relationship between the client and the therapist. So if the rapport is good, if the chemistry is good, then the outcome is probably going to be good.
Mm,
So what I say to people I'm trying to help, I help people all the time try to find therapists is It's just like if you were looking online dating, you know,
Yeah.
like you need to treat this, yeah. You're gonna look, you're gonna read bios. Sometimes on people's websites, they'll have a little video of themselves talking.
Mm,
I want you to look at them like, do I like what this person is saying? And then I want you to either call them and ask them for a consultation or a Zoom meeting just to get to be with them for a second and see how it feels. And you can even book a first session without committing to therapy. I always say to new people, like, listen, the first hour, you're checking me out, I'm checking you out, we're seeing if this is a match. And it might not be. And if it's not, I'm going to help you. I'm going to refer you to somebody who might be. And I just try to leave that door open
mm,
because that's two human beings. Not every two human beings are going to be a match. And if you have a feeling like, something they're saying isn't hitting right, or you're not vibing with the way that they're approaching things, it does not matter how many initials they have after their name and how good the rest of the internet says they are. That is probably not going to result in a good outcome for you
mm,
because you already don't feel that alliance there. So it's really important to feel one. I recently was talking to a friend who she scheduled 3 different appointments with 3 different therapists, and each one was just basically like a chance for her to check them out and see what it was like to be with them. And I really thought that was such a great approach. I mean, she had the time and she had the money to be able to do that. But that relationship is so key. So I would say to people, don't give up hope
mm.
and keep looking and keep asking. Because if you do have the right match, you're going to have a good outcome.
Yeah, I love how someone as qualified in that field as you, Lisa, is sitting there talking about what I try and put across on the podcast with coaching in regards to have multiple consultations. And I call it exactly what you called it. Do you pick up the vibe?
Yeah.
It's this sort of universal energy, and I had it. The reason I can talk about it is because I had it with my first coach. I was like, oh,
Oh, yeah.
who is this? And
Mhm.
I joke and I say he could get me to hop on one foot for an hour in a preparation. I go, yep, should I do any more? Because as you say, it feeds this relationship of it's just unstoppable. If you find essentially what I'm saying there, it's like again with therapy. And this is again what I say when I do a consultation with someone. I ask, have you had consultations with anyone else? Because you might actually look at doing that. Because, if you come on coaching with me, I want this to be the right decision for you. I want you to know that actually, out of these few people, you're still the one that I'd pick. And I think that's super important because tying that into don't give up hope as well. You've made that first step to taking on a professional in the field, whichever field that is. And you do see it, don't you, where it's like you maybe have a bad coaching experience or a bad therapy experience, or you have that one consultation. And maybe that's what could change your life for both of these realms, coaching and therapy.
Mm,
Mm,
mm. Yeah, I think so. And what a nice, I think when you leave it open for new clients, like you're talking about, like maybe I'm not going to be a match, or are you checking out other people? I think there's a reassurance there that the other person can relax and like actually see how they feel,
mm,
as opposed to feeling that like I don't know if solicitous is the right word, but feeling like, oh, I'm taking your time, so I've got to sign on with you, right? So you're alleviating that and helping them to be able to just be free to make the right decision for themselves, which also benefits you because if your client like really sees you and talks to you and chooses you,
mm.
that's going to be a better client for you probably in the long run also.
For sure, for sure. It's quite something when you do catch that because you're like, whoa, this person is, and also, I'd quite like to pick your brains with, so where I just mentioned my first coach there, and he could literally tell me to do anything, and I'd do it, and I mean that in the best way possible for anyone listening. But with that level of, for coaching and perhaps therapy as well, do you feel like it's a good thing to see that person as is on a pedestal the right phrase? Because I personally, for me, it really helps me as an athlete to
Mm,
have that respect, that essentially feeling like my coach is above me from a he knows more than me. He's guiding me to my goals. I can't get there without my coach.
Mm.
Is that a good thing depending on how I guess that's a bit of a can of worms there, how you view it, because it's going to be person dependent, I guess.
I think it depends on what you're doing. So
Mm,
if you're, like you said, coach, therapy, and I think it depends on the individual. So for coaching, I think that's quite common, the idea that the person who's coaching you has expertise
mm,
in something that you're pursuing. In psychotherapy, the whole idea of the therapist being like this all-knowing, um,
Oracle.
exalted person, yeah, who has all the answers, that's kind of not popular right now. And even I consider myself deep, deep down inside, I consider myself a Rogerian, and Carl Rogers was around in, the 60s and the 70s, and his type of psychotherapy was called humanistic, which means I'm a human being, you're a human being, we're two humans, and we're connecting and talking about your problems and your goals. And I think that being human and being authentic is an important part of how I try to hear people and sit with people.
Mm,
Now, I do have some clients who have found me via Instagram, which initially was a little bit weird because I have this fitness part of my life, where I do education. And so
yeah.
I have an Instagram that is strength training combined with mental health, data, science. And so initially, when the first client or two found me there and then asked me for psychotherapy, I felt like, oh, is that a conflict? Because they're seeing me, outside of the therapy office. Overall, that has gone very, very well because people who have selected me are people who like that content and that mix. And they also see me as someone who is human, but also somebody who is disciplined and somebody who works hard. So I think there's a mix there of doing something that is hard, doing something that maybe they're not doing, getting themselves to the gym regularly, for example, and also being a human being about it, not being, I do not by any means have any kind of like image of being perfect. A lot of my content is about being imperfect. So I think, but I think probably there are plenty of athletes out there who want the absolute highest level of expertise and success and who want that pedestal person.
Mm,
So I think if that works for you, go for it. I don't think it would work in psychotherapy because it would probably keep you from talking about your imperfections,
yeah.
and your humanness. Because what is most helpful to talk about in therapy is stuff that you don't want to talk about in the rest of your life, which is usually things you feel guilt or shame about. So if you know that your therapist is a human being and that they're not perfect either, it makes it a lot easier
Mm.
to try to get to that tough stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I feel like as well, you touched on sort of fear there and what that could attribute. I feel like maybe there could be almost like a fear-based motivate. I don't know if there's, like you spoke about the person that needs to step on the scales in 2 weeks and have lost weight and that sort of the wall they've placed around that. I wonder if there is elements to that as well, where it's maybe when say we taking going to stage as the example,
Mm.
it's quite fear based that if you don't stick to the plan that you're suddenly on stage half naked, um and you haven't stuck to the plan, so it's sort of fear based, or maybe the shame that could be attributed if you don't do what you need to do to get there, if you
Mhm.
know what I
Well,
mean.
that type of reinforcement is, oh my gosh, I'm trying to bring up my behavioral psychology history. That is about trying to avoid a punishment, right?
Mm,
So the reason why you're motivated is because you want to avoid some future punitive opposite of incurring a reward. It's avoiding a punishment, right? So that's like, saying to a teenager, if you come home late on your curfew, you're going to be grounded,
for sure.
or you're going to have to take out the trash for a month. It's like you're going to incur something that is painful. And punishment can be effective, but overall, it is significantly less effective than reward.
Mm, yeah.
So anybody who has like ever trained a puppy dog or had a toddler knows that offering reward is a much more effective, sustainable way to encourage behavior that you want than using punishment or by taking things away. That can work in the short term, but it has extinction. So to your point, you need more than just the threat of the stage day to be able to be consistent
Mm.
and persistent with your behaviors.
Yeah, because when that goal is then removed, and that the thing is as well, Lisa, I'm sure you can probably with athletes you work with in different sports as well. It's everything so hyper focused on that date or dates if you're doing multiple performances. And there's two ways to think about it. I try and prep my clients for the after as well while they're in the prep, but it can be a bit tricky. And I've had
Yeah.
before, clients have said who are more experienced. I don't want to talk about it till the show's done, which I respect, for sure. But you're really not armed for that, are you? A lot of the time, particularly the first time, the flattening off we've spoken about, of course, can happen.
Mm.
I feel like as well this could maybe be something I've got to try and frame this right. So when you go into after your show, after your season, obviously there is the potential for you get to eat meals out. Da, 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 da. Now I know there's going to be a ton of people listening that do find it tricky in the opposite end of the spectrum, where actually they're not looking to stay lean. It's very hard for them to control not putting on excess body fat because of potentially the binging, the overeating, etc. It's
Yeah.
very, very common in our space. I hope I framed that right. So when it gets to that reverse out, when you're looking at the health, the sleep, etc., which we've touched on today, the motivation of the stage is gone, and we call it the goal is removed.
Hmm.
Is there anything from your standpoint? I don't know if there would be of what could sort of help people be able to be more mindful around that because of course it does become there's external pressures as well. Can you eat this? Can you do this, etc. I wonder if
Hmm.
there's anything from your brain of expertise that could help anyone that's approaching this time because the season is ending now.
Yeah. It's boundaries
Mm,
because the preparation, like you said, one of the things you enjoy about prep is how the boundaries are really solid. They're really black and white. They're really detailed and granular, right? You know what to do every moment of the day.
yeah,
And so, what we do not want, most people will struggle going from that level of structure and boundary to none at all.
yeah.
Yeah. And so, and you have to remember that your reward system has become dysregulated because you have been in a caloric deficit. So, some people actually get reward from experiencing that state of deprivation. And people who struggle with anorexia, they actually can feel, they can have a dopaminergic response. They can feel reward from being hungry.
Mm,
So it can screw up your reward system, for lack of a better expression off the top of my head. So you have to remember you are shifting dramatically from this level of being in deprivation, being in a state of, you know, caloric restriction where every minute of your day is structured. You can't go from that to nothing and not risk the wheels coming off the bus. So the question is, what is going to be the Goldilocks amount of boundary? What are the things to aim at? I mean, I had a fitness competitor talk to me about going out to eat with some of the other women she was competing with after and watching the array of behaviors that that were pretty sad to hear about because it's like it feels like, oh, now the restrictions are off. It's like what are the boundaries that would serve you? Because you most certainly don't want to be like sitting in bed with a giant bag of like Reese's peanut butter cups until you vomit.
mm,
Um, so is it going to be, because some people, if they like structure and they like discipline and they like kind of having rules, okay, how can we make that around trying to be in bed for 8 to 9 hours or trying, what are your goals? What are some like rough macro goals or some rough
mm,
calorie goals? Not that we need to be as granular, but you probably need some holding, some support, right? So the boundary is not to restrict you, it's to support you so that you can function more flexibly, but that it's not like there's nothing there
Mm,
around you. Sometimes I talk to people because a lot of people wear Garmin's or Fitbits or Apple Watches. I'm like, how's your HRV,
mm,
your heart rate variability? Because a lot of times people's are in the toilet at the end of preparation or really hard work or a sprint, as I call it for even my working professionals. So it's like, how can we shift your disciplined, structured heart and self on things that are going to serve you so that you can recover without tipping over into something that's either pathological or not healthy.
yeah, for sure. Because it can creep up and happen without you even realize. Like it's almost like a again, like you say, you're in a deficit, right? And I often reference, if you were trying to get secrets out of someone in the army or something of that nature, you would sleep deprive them and you'd probably put them in a severe deficit and they would confess all. And
That's right.
because it's labeled as bodybuilding, it doesn't take away from what's required and, for what you need to do. But I love what we've stumbled across there. That is absolute gold. And what a way to almost summarize what we've spoken about there. And from what you just said, it just popped in my mind. The boundaries post show are there to serve you. The boundaries are there to serve you. And as you said, the boundaries are there to support you. And I love that because there's so much in the space as well where as a coach, it's like, right, I want you to still go for your morning walk. So that's still the same as the prep, but it's obviously, it's not as you're not in, the caloric deficit, etc., etc. What I want us to do is keep that there. Let's keep the weight training sessions there on the same days. If we have a bit of a rest post show, fine, but after that, okay, and
Yeah.
can we keep, a bit of cardio there for health and put your music on. Keep busy when you are, of course, dealing with potentially the ramifications off the back of the prep. So I feel sometimes when I'm trying to, say this structure is to help you, I don't want to, everything I do is to serve you. But I love that because that could help reframe. Because some people do a season and they go, I don't want to fucking do cardio. I don't want to fucking do, I want to do what I want. And they're not serving themselves. And absolutely, trust me, guys, you know my story if you're listening. I understand. You can absolutely feel at that point where you're like, I don't want to follow rules. I don't want
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
boundaries. I want to do what I want to do. I've also
Yeah.
been there where I've ended up in these scenarios that we've touched on there, but that little reframe there, Lisa, absolute gold because it is. It's to serve you guys. It absolutely isn't. That could be something that people, they go, actually, maybe that's something that I could listen to this time around. As I say, the season is coming to an end within the next couple of months because
Hmm.
it's difficult.
Hmm.
It is difficult because you're inside, aren't you? You don't half the time, Lisa. I'm not going to lie. You don't really know what to feel. You know.
Hmm.
Mm,
Hmm. And so it's like then after competition, you want to get back in touch with all the signals, right? Your hunger signal, your tired signal, your stop, you're in pain now signal. It's like being able to decompress into somewhere where then you can self-regulate. Because I get not wanting to track and not wanting all of this rigidity, but to go from super rigid to nothing is a setup. So how do you, and I think Goldilocksing for you as a coach is probably doing a lot of that motivational interviewing, like, okay, figuring out in collaboration, what's going to be just enough, but not too much and not too little. And what did we learn from last time? And,
mm.
that kind of a conversation that doesn't feel to the client like you're just disseminating instructions like you were in the prep, right? But that feels way more autonomous on their part that they're helping you shape
Mm.
whatever that structure is going to look like.
As the collaboration and as you touched on, of course, today, as the coach that's a human as well. I understand how you let's do this together because you
Mhm.
you can really, any coaches listen that can really help to reframe. Now, of course, Lisa, thank you for your time today. This I love podcasting with you because I'm like, there's so much good stuff here, and people listening, I'm sure will gain a lot from the episode. So thank you so much. I will put your Instagram handle in the description as well if people want to follow. We got a very good, feedback from the first episode, so I'm sure that cliffhanger. Maybe we do another cliffhanger to another episode that will come in the future if you'll come back on.
Of course I will. Yeah, it's my pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Lisa, and enjoy. Before we hit record, guys, Lisa's now got the population of her hometown doubling because the students are coming back. So, wishing you luck.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
See you later, Lisa.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.